You are hearing the voice of Patricia Angelin. I am Alba Technique, and you are at All the Feels. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I'm thinking about feelings that are around snow. People just have a lot of feelings around weather. Since I became, I don't even know what word to use, physically completely intolerant of any degree of heat whatsoever in my body organism, after receiving a number of heat and sunstrokes over the years on location. Of course, my feelings are of danger. My limbic system goes, danger, 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 whenever it gets to be above, I forget what it is in Celsius, but about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is absolutely ridiculous. And my left brain goes, that is stupid. But it's not. The limbic system goes, no, 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 it's not stupid. You could die. You will die if you get too hot because your brain will explode. That's just medically the fact. So at any rate, but many more people have limbic reaction to any kind of cold. They just hate to be chilly. They just don't want to be cold. And so many, especially people who come north, I'm in New York right now, to this middle Atlantic climate where there is winter, have negative reactions to the fact that it is winter. Now with global warming, cycles of heating of the planet, I got a joke yesterday from a good friend, and he wrote, "What do we want? Global warming. When do we want it? Now." And my reaction was absolute horror. I knew it was a joke. But, what he was laughing at, of course, was that he was cold because he's in New York and it was winter and we had snow. And a lot of New Yorkers, and indeed many urban dwellers, have a lot of problem whenever there's too much precipitation of any kind. So my point is that from the weather announcers, because everything is about how people feel these days, they're all commentating upon whether it's too cold or too warm or whatever. Meanwhile, you have situations like we had in my country, in the United States, in Washington and environs, where they got dumped on with snow last week and people were stranded because nobody's accustomed to dealing with that kind of a weather event. And people were stranded for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on the main north-south arterial, which is I-90, Interstate 95. And another friend of mine had a problem in the Midwest, had a problem with his truck, and he has knee problems, and he fell trying to get necessary thing for his truck, and nobody stopped to help him. I mean, it's really absolutely astounding how we have feelings about weather. So I want you all listening to acknowledge that and question yourself, what are your personal feelings about weather? I think we are divided into mountain people and beach people, I've often said. And the beach people, they just love it warm. And that's their idea of how it should be all the time. And then there would be mountain people like me, not literally mountain, but I like it cold. I liked it cold even before I had a heat problem, because I figured if you're cold, you can always put on more clothes, you can heat a neck wrap up, you can put sheepskin on your feet, whatever. You got a little more control over being cold than you do, because if you're hot, there's nothing really you can do except for take off all your clothes. And even that, which in my case would be aesthetically not a good thing to do. Anyway, it causes feelings in people. And so today in our poetry series, when it snowed, I was thinking about all of the feelings. And my primary feeling whenever it snows is thinking of the farmers in many parts of the world. Snow is needed for crops to grow beautifully and correctly. The snow is like a blanket over the freezing ground. and the freeze thaw, freeze thaw, freeze thaw, freeze thaw. Yes, Maine, perfect, the state of Maine. And so at any rate, there we are. Lots of different feelings around the weather, particularly in winter, particularly as all of our civic leaders are a little bit hysterical, understandable, but they are a little bit hysterical about influenza and COVID and cold weather, and all these things seem to meld together in all of our feelings. So simply acknowledge that for yourself in whatever way it is for you that's unique to you, and know that you do have feelings about the weather. Also know that your feelings about the weather are not necessarily mine or somebody else's. So don't have an expectation that other people want what you want. Good idea? Good idea. Poetry. There are two things I want to share with you today, and they're both on snow. And one is one that you definitely have heard the last 3 lines on, because it's by the great Robert Frost. And when I came across this again about 2 weeks ago, what struck me about it with a quick read, because as you know, I don't prepare. It's really more a sharing with me to you. I was struck by another, I don't even know how to put this, but I think Robert Frost is talking about an experience that I think all of us would have had, or most of us, at one time or another. You know that feeling when you're standing on a great height and you almost feel like you want to step off, even though you know you would die if you did? It's like a thing that you just want to go there. It's sort of a darkness somewhere in us that, and we don't do it, like almost always, because it would be suicide to do it, but that kind of pull toward that, especially if you're sick or if you're tired. So listen to this poem with that in mind. Robert Frost is a traveler. A long time ago, I forget what his years are, but it's long enough that he's traveling differently than we travel now. So listen to this, and then there'll be another one by MacNeice. Here we go. Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Isn't that interesting? We've all heard it, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. In our journeying, whether we don't know whether he was in a one-horse sleigh or whether he was riding on horseback, but those woods and the darkness and the depth and the silence and the strange non-sound of the muffling of the snow was clearly pulling him. But it was his worldly obligations that made him continue with the journey, as we must all do in these pandemic and quasi-post-pandemic times. We all, almost all of us, have miles to go before we sleep. Next. MacNeice. This came to my attention about 2 years ago, and I just rediscovered it. And I was up in Vermont in a hotel at a wedding, a wonderful, joyous occasion. And in this particular hotel, they put poetry next to the bed, along with a little cookie for the guests every night. And this I had never seen. And the poet is MacNeice, and his dates are 1907 to 1963. And what he is talking about is he is not outside in this looking at the snow. He is inside. And there is a juxtaposition of his inside and the outside, and like what's in between. And that's what it's about. It's about this vase of roses that he has on a table in front of, I imagine, a picture window, looking out upon the snow that is right outside of that. And so it's about space and time. Snow. Snow by MacNeice. The room was suddenly rich, and the great bay window was spawning snow and pink roses against it. Soundlessly collateral and incompatible, world is suddener that we fancy it. World is crazier and more of it than we think. Incorrigibly plural. I peel and portion a tangerine and spit the pips and feel the drunkenness of things being various. And the fire flames with bubbling sound, for world is more spiteful and gay than one supposes. On the tongue, on the eyes, on the ears, in the palm of one's hands, there is more than glass between the snow and the huge roses. Isn't that absolutely wonderful? It's metaphysical as well. So, two things and glass in between. And he's struck by how various and plural things are. There's more than glass between the snow and the pink roses. The spaces between. I leave you with that. I leave you to think and feel about the spaces between, which are such a gift to all of us. Until next week on Instagram Live, I am Patricia Angelin of Alba Technique, and you are at all the feel.